So welcome back. In the previous video, we have configured the Spring Security and we have completed the core components of the JWT. And now in this video, we are going to complete next component. So our next component is the JWT Authentication Filter. Before we look at the code, let's quickly understand the important concept that will be used in the JWT Authentication Filter file. So please make sure you have gone through these particular points. So please make sure that you have gone through these all points. So let's build a file now. So uh, now suppose a user has already login and they should a JWT token. Okay. Now the user will send another request, for example, to access the profile. Now first it send the token for the login. Now again he send another request for the accessing the profile. So now the request contains the JWT token, but our Spring Security doesn't automatically know who the user is. Or whether the token is valid or not. So we need a component that checks every incoming request, extract the JWT, validates it, and authenticates the user. So that's exactly the JWT authentication filter does. So basically, our request flow will like that. First, client will send the authorization. That means a BRL JWT. Then it goes through from this file that is JWT authentication filter. So this will extract the token and validate the token, then load the user and Spring Security context it will provide, and then the request going to the controller side. So before coding, let's create our JWT authentication filter. So this filter will execute once for every request. So it will extract the JWT from the authorization header. So while writing the code, uh, please make sure you are mentioning the component to this file. First, we are extending this class to once per request filter. So basically, this is provided by the Spring Security. So it will give us the guarantee that our filter extends only once for each request. Then we are going to add two dependency injection. The first is the JWT service. Then the second will be custom user detail service. Basically, the JWT service is uh, responsible for generating and validating the token, and the customer user detail service will be responsible to load the user details from the database. Now, after this, the main tool that we can say that our main method that is the do filter internal that we need to add. So this method will be the protected. So let me know. Basically, whenever the request comes from browser, so let's assume the request is for get for profile details. So before which that request to the controller, it has to pass through this filter. Now, so this request will we are passing this request to this uh, HTTP server request. Now, this will contain the information like the URL, the header, the request body, and the all details. So that everything that the client has seen that will come in from in this request part. Now the second is the um, response. So this will send back to the client that 200 okay or 404 like. And then the third is the filter chain. So we are passing it. So now Spring Boot will be responsible for this chain. This will contain our JWT filter chain, then codes filter chain, then authentication filter chain, and then it reaches to the controller. So this block is responsible for the filter chain. Now, first, we read the value of the authorization header. Suppose any request sent the BRL. So generally, the request is like the BRL UIJJ in something code. So now this header will contains that full code with the. So basically, authorization header is also a standard header that used to send credentials. So the server look at this header to know who is the user is. Now, the if the header is missing or doesn't start with the BRL, so we simply skip the JWT authentication and the continue process the request. So now we have got that this request is the bearer, and if not, then return. Then next we remove the bearer prefix and extract only the JWT token. So basically the code will look like this. So now this code is like this. It consists first the bearer, then the code. So basically it is the identifier that after bearer the code is. So first we are checking that it has bearer and not null. And if it is has passed this condition, then we are removing the this bearer part from the from this line. If this condition true, then it will return. So basically, Spring simply passes the request to the next filter and says that I cannot authenticate this request now. Next task is that we have to extract the username. So we are extracting username. For now, the username for our database is the user email. So inside every JWT, there is a payload. So this method will read that payload. So one more thing that this JWT contains the information. So from the information, we are claiming that a particular subject. So for now, we are claiming the username. Basically, for now, for our database, we are claiming for the user email because we have declared the user email as a username. So after the extracting the email, we check two conditions. First, the email should uh, not be null. Okay. Then the second is that the security context folder dot get context. So this should also not be null. So basically security context folder stores the authentication information for the current request. So if authentication already exists, we don't authenticate the same request again. So it uh, holds the context. In both conditions, if these both conditions are true, we load the user details. So we have loaded the user detail with this customer user detail service. Load user by username. Okay. Now, uh, we validate the JWT by calling the JWT service is token valid. Okay, so we have already see in previous video what this function actually do. So this method will check whether the token signature is correct or not, and also it is responsible for checking the expiration whether it belongs to the correct user. Only if all these checks passes, do continue. So next, we create user password authentication token. So this object represents a successful authenticated user inside a Spring Security. So we pass the user details in this. So set the credentials to the null. because the password is no longer needed after login and providing users authority for roles. After creating the authentication object, we attach additional request details like the web authentication details. After the token value validification, it will check all the passes. If every pass has true, then only this if will perform. Now, the first. In this, we have create an object representing a successful authenticated user. So it will store the user details, new keyword they have used. User details we are storing. Then we are not storing the password because password is not needed. So credentials we are not saving. No, because the password isn't needed after the login. Now the role. Role or get authority means the get a role means the role is of user or admin. Now uh, we are setting extra information about the current request, such as now web authentication details. So by this we are storing the client IP address in session ID if available, which is useful for auditing and the logging. So this is the most important thing. So it tells Spring Security that this request belong to an authenticated user, and after this, anywhere in your application, you can get the current login user from this context folder. So basically, we are saving this context to this security context folder. So you can see that while we have checked our first for the user, we have checked here that get context. So if it is already uh, has a session ID and already has a context, then we are proceeding like that. Then finally we call the filter chain to filter request response. So one last time, this tells Spring Security that our JWT validation is complete now, and the request can continue to the next filter and eventually reach the controller. If the token was validated, protected APIs execute successfully. Otherwise, access the protected resource is denied. So our JWT authentication flow is now complete. Uh, so not authentication flow, but the flow of the authentication filter. Now we have successfully authenticated user details and generate a JWT token also. Client has sent the request for the login and it has successfully passed through the JWT authentication filter and it has passed all required conditions. Now the server will require a specified version of the response. So now the server does not now send a simple message, that success message, because the front end also need the JWT token for the future request and the logged in user information to display on the dashboard. So instead of returning multiple values separately, we will wrap everything inside a single DTO. So we are creating one more DTO here for the logging response. Oh, okay, it is already present here. So we will modify it now. So we are also in the response we are returning the message with the user detail. So we just need to add one string that will contain the token. So now our content will also know the actual token, what it is. It will say, until now, we have created the JWT filter. So now after this filter, it will our server will return the now client will send the request. Request passes all the checks from the JWT filter. Then it will send our server will send the login response with containing the token. Now it is time to define the main business operations of our application. So for that we need to code in the user service interface now. So until now, our controller doesn't know how registration, login, or profile retrieval actually works. It should only receive the request and return the response. So we have to write our actual service layer logic into the user service layer. So now in user service, uh, the user response, register, login, and get profile. These three methods we are defined. So now let's see their actual implementation. What we have to do, what we have to update for the JWT. So this is the user service. So there are three methods: register, login, and get profile. So now let's see what we need to update for the JWT. So our this existing user service implementation is now no longer sufficient. So first let's discuss what we need to update. So in the previous version, we are very straightforward that we simply store the password exactly as the user enter. This means if the password was admin123, we are storing it as a plain text as admin123. Now our functionality has changes that we have tackled with our main security risk. So we are now encoding the password. So to solve this, we need to introduce the password encoder here. So password encoder now we have declared. So now during registration, instead of saving the original password, we call this password encoder to encode it. Now the login process, we have also a little bit change that earlier we manually fetch the user from the database and then compare the password using the equals method. So now this approach only works when the password are stored as a plain text. So now in the updated version, we remove the actual password manual comparison. So we are using the authentication manager for that. So we also need to add the final authentication manager. Okay. Once the now the user is successfully authenticated and we fetch the user object from the database. So now we are fetching the database using the JWT service because we are not directly now accessing from the front end. Uh, First, the request will come from the browser to the filter. Now, from that filter, now once the user is successfully authenticated, we fetch the user object from the database and generate. Now, we are doing this using the JWT service. So for that, we also need to mention the JWT service. Okay. Now, we don't need this user service implementation constructor now. And after that, we need to mention the required argument constructor. Okay. Okay. Now the register. So for registration, I don't think there are as such changes here. So the only will changes will be in the login response now. Before JWT, we are getting the body from the repository, but for before this, now we want to validate using the authentication manager. So we need to update the login. So instead, we need to update the login method. So first, we don't now use the equal method to check for the password. Now we need to update according to the JWT. So first, what we need is that we need to add the authentication manager here. So to this authentication manager, we are calling the authenticate, and we are passing here the one object. So the object is we are creating the object from the authentication token. Okay. So now this is like a container. So this object will now responsible to hold the login credentials like the username and password. So it is just a container now. So it is just storing the username and password. So in our case, the username is the get email and request get password. So now this will responsible to hold these two data. Now the authentication manager starts the string security authentication flow. So it will call the our customer user detail service. So that will load the user from the database using the email. Then use the configured password encoder to compare the entered password and the hashed password. Now the if the email doesn't exist or the password is incorrect, it will simply throw the error. But uh, if the details and credentials are correct, then the login will happen. So after the successful authentication, we fetch the complete detail of the user. So now we are fetching the details from our database. So now here, if it is not found in our database, we are returning here user is not in database. Okay. Now, now, uh, here we are creating the new token uh, for the JWT service. We are calling the method generate token for the user. So now, JWT service creates a signed JWT containing information such as user email, and the token will act as the user identity for the future request. So the user doesn't need to send the email and password again. So we now we need to update this login response body. So in that body, we also need to return the token. By doing this, our login method is now complete. Now our service layer is ready. So after service, uh, we have to move to the control. So let's see what we want to update in the AuthController now. The first change we have to replace the manual constructor. So we have created here the manual constructor for the user service AuthController. So we are removing this, and now for this initialization, we are gen we are setting the required organic constructor now. So this will be responsible for creating the constructor and setting and getting functions for this. Okay. Registration endpoint will remain same. It receives the registration detail, passes them to the user service register, then I need to return the register user information. So there is not any change now in the controllers because we don't want to change any path for the request. So all other code will remain as it is. We have completed our the JWT authentication implementation here.